difficulties. We'll be right back. Maybe I'll try that again. Hey everyone, give us a couple of minutes. We've got a couple of technical difficulties. We'll be right back with you. All
Okay,
right.
Rich, should we get it started?
Yeah.
Okay,
I think we're ready.
I think we're ready finally. I just had to, download an app on government system not authorized, but that's okay. I'll get permission later.
Don't tell the security team that.
I know exactly. Okay, guys, thank you for coming. And Rich, thanks for inviting me. I am going to share my screen so that you guys can see the lovely PowerPoint we've got going on. And we'll get started. So I'm here today to talk to you guys. Well, first of all, let me just confirm that you guys can see the PowerPoint okay?
Not yet. This is double click to enter full screen mode.
Okay. All right. I think we look good.
Tanya, if it's the same presentation as before, I can share it too. You'll just have to tell me to, change slides. Oh, there we go.
That'd be great. Yeah.
So
I
we can see
just
it now.
Zoom is wanting to quit on me. No.
Hey,
All
Tanya, you
right.
want me to share from this side? All right. Looks like Tanya's been lagged out somehow. We'll get her back on. Give us a couple of minutes. It's possible, Randall. Ah, it's a good idea, Kaylin. We'll just get her on audio. I can run her slides for her.
Okay, I guess you guys get to experience some of my everyday fun, which is that we have so many security systems on our computers that we often crash. We call it Reboot Friday, where we reboot a minimum of 3 times for all the updated software. And so my apologies to everyone. I'm gonna let Rich do all the like movement and whatever, and I'm just gonna talk, and hopefully that will not overload my system. Okay. Okay, so I have been an assistant United States attorney for over 21 years. It's been the entirety of my legal career, and I ended up in this section right out of law school called the Asset Forfeiture Unit. And essentially, what that means is on behalf of the government, I litigate property interest for assets that are part of a crime, divest other people's interests, including the perpetrator, the criminal's interest, and spouses and children and mother-in-laws and whoever else might have an interest in said property that I'm going to take. I get legal title in that asset to the government, and at that point, if there's victims and related to the crime, we give those funds back to victims. So um, I kind of do Bernie Madoff type of stuff. That's the most famous case that everyone knows in the District of Colorado. I've been here since 2008. So when we have our, fraudsters, our Ponzi scheme investors on a lower level, it is my unit that goes after and finds all the assets purchased with the proceeds of that crime and gets them back to victims. So today we have an agenda, and I don't know if Rich has my PowerPoint yet,
Do.
but
I have it
yeah,
up for you, Tanya. I do have a question for you. I think I
yeah,
know
go
the
for it.
answer to this, but your what are your titles? Is Asset Recovery Chief. I think that's an interesting title. Have you recovered hundreds of millions or perhaps even billions in assets?
Yes, Rich White. In fact, I have. You guys might have heard of this thing called COVID, and with that came a bunch of money from the SBA. We have a whole COVID fraud initiative because, sort of interestingly, the SBA's finance center is like just down the street from me, and so we had venue over all this, and so just in sort of that case alone. Um, so, but my average, I would say, day-to-day bread and butter case is and but yeah, that's where I stay in the zone of.
I don't know if it's breaking up for some of the attendees, but I think when I change the slide, you might have some issues. So we might have to go slideless today and just have a conversation. Yeah. Let me go ahead and try stopping the share, Spencer. Okay. We'll do that, Tanya. I think you're back with us, but you're on mute.
I am back with you and I'm on mute. And I'm gonna try just again to just sort of minimize the bandwidth. I'm gonna turn off the video. Maybe that will help.
Sure.
Okay. So today I thought I would talk about some of the types of criminal conducts that we see um, related to sort of the business entity and versus vis-a-vis individuals. Um, and then sort of the response we do to that. And then because Rich loves it, we're going to talk about some cryptocurrency and then maybe go through a case or two. So talking with Rich, he says, you guys about the BEC and the hacking, that's sort of like probably why you're at this conference. It's your specialty. But he found the insiders really interesting. So I'm going to talk about insiders. And these are truly, the threat within. I would say on average, I can think off the top of my head, like 4 or 5 cases I've handled this year on inside embezzlers. Um, just stealing from their employers. So the employee, generally speaking, is obviously in the accounting department in some fashion, not always necessarily, and I'll get to that in a little bit. They tend to always start off small, but then they gradually get bolder, and it's basically because they get so emboldened that it becomes unsustainable and they get caught. I will tell you a lot of the catching usually comes when their supervisor has been replaced or there's a formal audit. But a lot of this is will go on for at least a couple of years. So some of the things with your just bread and butter, your employee is sneaking money from you. Internally, you can do a 2-party verification for all payments. It's impossible to do that for every single payment I get, but to have some thresholds on which further confirmation or review is, and then watch for laziness, because especially once they become bolder, you start to see they just start to send a check to their mother-in-law. And why would you maybe paying an individual be unusual for your business? They send it in whole dollar amounts. I would suspect that paying most of your vendors would be very unusual to pay in whole dollars. And then payments to vendors that you wouldn't normally do business with, like Amazon. I mean, what are you ordering off of Amazon? And maybe it's, office supplies, but a lot of times it can be a Tiffany lamp going directly to your employee. And yes, that's a real example. Ironically, she worked at Amazon, so that was sort of weird that they didn't really catch that they were sending her personal things. We go to the next slide. The other kind of embezzler, and this is where they can actually somewhat be outside of your accounting department. It's where an employee creates their LLC, an LLC, or uses a friend who has an LLC, and all of a sudden you start doing business with this company, except you're not really doing business with them. I've seen it where someone who is overseeing the shipping department, and all of a sudden this company has hired a new shipping vendor, except they haven't really. They still use the old one, but then there's this new one, and he just certified the invoices that like, yep. Another very common one with sort of fake vendors is that the vendor is real, but the amount being paid is inflated, or what's being provided on every occasion isn't really there. And then your employee is receiving a kickback. So I think I've seen like 2 or 3 of those this year. Again, it's only when someone new sort of starts really looking and overseeing what's going on here that this comes to light. But a lot of the same sort of practicalities of what you can do to look out for that are very similar to looking for, an embezzling employee. Have some sort of 2-party verification, really know your large vendors, have thresholds. Like if you're paying a certain company over a certain amount, you might want to look. And then again, look for the laziness. That's a lot of times where they do it very carefully at the beginning, but then they realize no one's minding the shop, and it gets a lot more just brazen. So that's my tips there. I also think you could probably start using some modeling. Like if all of a sudden your accounts payables are going way up, but you're not really changing anything that would match that, that's worth looking, that maybe you can create an internal auditing type of system.
That's
What do
really
you?
interesting, Tanya.
Yeah.
Maybe a comment, not a question, but
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit of overlap in what we typically see on the IT security side. So, like we'll deal with third-party risk, and evaluate the technical posture, security practices of some of the vendors that we deal with. But there's a little bit of an overlap then in between, I guess the financial risk and, insider abuse and, these third party organizations that we set up and start to monitor from a security posture perspective.
Right. Yeah. Um, it is a dicey sort of thing because you don't want to accuse your vendors of being untoward, but they become friends. Is like how I've seen it happen a few times, where the person who's overseeing the contract, so to speak, they make their own side deal. And I would say in some regards, the smaller the business, sort of the smaller the business of the vendor, the more susceptible it is to this type of issue. So unfortunately. Okay, I think we're ready to move to the next one. Business email compromise schemes, the romance scam for businesses.
We may
I
know
say that,
about this a little bit.
yeah. I say that because believe it or not, sometimes once I'm following what I call like the money launderer's accounts, you will see all sorts of frauds go into the same place. So it's the same people running the same type of scam, just who they're interfacing with is different, whether it's, someone online that they're romancing, or it's a very popular one was send me first and last deposit for rent, but they were never actually renting out the apartment. Those funds will find their way to the same place as business email compromise schemes. And so very briefly, because again, I think you guys are all very familiar with it. Um, Somehow someone gets access into your system, whether it's just sending a fake email with the wrong email address, or I've had times where they've actually, I'm going to go into it later, they've actually inserted themselves into your system. And so it looks like Rich Stevens is actually sending that Slack message because it's coming from his account, but someone has hacked that account. And so you can't tell that it's not Rich sending it. Um,
I do need Google Play cards pretty much once a month.
yeah, yeah. They show up when they learn you're anticipating sending a large payment to a legitimate vendor, and then they send some sort of communication changing the payment instructions. And hopefully you guys have taught all of your employees that when you see a, hey, don't send it here, send the money over there, that is a big red flag. And that's really the best red flag there is for this. If there is that change, you really want to get some sort of other verification instead of just corresponding vis-a-vis the same communication method that the change of payment came from. And Rich, I think taking your notes, I think we can leave that at that. We'll go to the next one.
For sure.
Yeah. And then
This is a very funny one for us, I think.
is it?
All year we try to keep hackers out, and today we invited all of them to this presentation.
Yeah. So it's our, it's a general generic term, but I did want to point out a few things to everyone. So 18 USC 10 section 1030 is the criminal code that we use to sort of to go after people who are accessing your computer systems without authorization. And so for external people, that's really easy, right? You have a protected computer. That's basically every computer. You have a protected computer and they have accessed it without authorization. That's a solid 1030 violation where we have seen it a couple of times in the last few years. And where it gets a little dicey is when you have an employee, a disgruntled employee, or maybe even a former employee. The case law says that, so the statute says if they exceed their authorization with intent to defraud, that they violated the section 1030. But the Supreme Court has come down not too long ago, a few years ago, and sort of define what exceed authorization is. And I don't think it's as intuitive as most people would think. Exceeds authorization, I think generally you would think, hey, you don't have permission to be here under like our rules, regulations, or policies. Well, that's not it. The court says, no. If they can be in the place because you gave them the keys, but you told them not to steal anything, that's just improper use of their access. But they haven't exceeded their authorized access simply by being there. So the way to think about this is, the way I think about it is like, let's say you give your IT person the keys to your safe. Okay, but he's not allowed to go and take anything from it. If he uses his keys for the safe and goes and takes something, he has not violated this exceeds authorization because you gave him the keys. It's when he does something extra to go get keys that you didn't give him to then get to your safe, even if he had like keys to your office, but not to the safe. It's when he does something extra to obtain access to that information that your disgruntled employee or your former employee has now exceeded their authorization. So I don't think that's a super friendly interpretation for using
No,
this
not at
statute.
all. It's
Yeah, no,
really difficult to prosecute at that point when, somebody's done something wrong.
exactly. Like this came up. The Supreme Court case was he had accessed a database to get sensitive personal information on people's whereabouts, criminal history. for payment by someone. And so he has the legitimate authority based on his job to access that information, but not for an improper use. And they said no. And then in another case, it was essentially a disgruntled employee knew he was about to leave, knew he was being fired, and stole like trade secrets, customer lists, etc. But because he could access them while he was there, he was not found to be in violation of this section. So it does kind of really, that interpretation really inhibits our ability to use that. So I think that's just worth you guys knowing and being mindful of that, and maybe, you know, having some sort of review for who has access to be where.
Especially
Okay.
when people are, being forcefully or leaving the organization, just deprovisioning them from all systems seems to be paramount, or else you've given them access and they can do all kinds of things without potentially getting prosecuted.
Yes, exactly. And things like maybe you haven't locked up, you know, your trade secrets tight enough. And, you know, even your assistant can have access to that. Maybe you should have a second level of security to that, so that truly sensitive information is only you've only authorized access by who really needs it.
It's fascinating, Tanya.
Okay, so you've been a victim of a crime. What should you do? Believe it or not, I know maybe your first instinct is to contact law enforcement. I think your first instinct should be contact your bank. Because there is a possibility of, you know, if you have, whether it's any of these systems, any of these criminal conducts, it's about money flowing out of your account. And your bank may have the ability to claw some of that back almost immediately. And then if it's like a BEC, you want to have your bank and you contact the receiving financial institution as well as immediately as possible. And again, we've had a lot of success in that sort of immediate response, stopping further movement of the money. And, you know, I don't even have to get involved. Doesn't even have to be a big legal process. They just kind of reverse the transfer. Then your third step is going to be to contact law enforcement. This is the link. You file it, what's called an IC3 report, to report the crime. If it is something like a BEC hacking type of thing, they're going to move fast. We have a really quick response team. We get warrants out pretty fast as soon as we get the information, but more importantly, we often are able to get a freeze on where we find that the money is. You can also, if you're not hearing back from that, contact your local FBI office. You can also contact your local state bureau of investigation. And because sometimes law enforcement is just not super responsive because they're busy, or, you know, whoever was minding that desk is on leave that week, it can happen. Your bank might have direct contacts with the law enforcement through their anti-money laundering people. So financial institutions hire a lot of former agents, Secret Service, FBI, etc., and those contacts are still good. So they might be able to help you getting through if you're not getting a super timely response from law enforcement.
So, Tanya, a couple of comments here. First is,
Yeah.
for the audience, this slide is probably really, really good details for your next tabletop when you run them. The second one is more of a question for you. How often are some of the first two steps missed? What percentage of your cases do you find that they didn't contact the bank? They didn't detail any of the receiving financial institution, and they immediately contacted law enforcement, and now they're, I don't know, two steps behind, a couple of days behind.
Truthfully, I do think most people intuitively follow this process. The problem is that the detection of the crime and when it occurred may be too late, right? So again, it goes back to, and I should have put it on, one of the things you can do if you are sending a large payment, you want to call and make sure it's received, right? By someone you know on the receiving end, because that's how a lot of these are actually detected. It's not someone realizing that they've been spoofed. It's the person who expected to receive the payment calls you and says, "Hey, where's that payment?" And then everyone's like, "Oh crap, what happened?" So um, another sort of proactive thing you can do, and again, I do think most people follow this kind of step intuitively, but it doesn't help if you are a week past the movement, and that is where truly just me come in.
Hmm. A
Because
weekend
after
is
that,
too late.
what's that?
A weekend, it's too late.
Yeah, yeah, it's too late to it's almost 100% too late to get 100% recovery. It is often too late to get that very quick, immediate reversal, right? And so now you're going through the process of, I'm a victim of a couple $1 million of fraud. The money is gone from step one and step two. It's now out there. And that's where you need us to come in. So like I said, I sort of intimated, we have a very quick response team with the FBI that when you file these IC3 complaints, we have all of our paperwork standardized essentially. We just got to put in your specifics. The FBI will interview you, get details on how the crime occurred, essentially, where you sent it from and where you sent it to, and then we start tracing the money, and we can get records pretty quickly to then follow that money. And if we're not so many hops down the line, we go and get it. But I mean, until it's spent, we will keep tracing it. So if it lands in a domestic bank account, that's the easiest for us. Like, we're just going to get a seizure warrant for that bank account for the amount of funds we can trace in there. So if your funds have split off, I might be able to get a couple of warrants for a couple of accounts, or sometimes I just might be left with, maybe 30,000 to your $100,000 loss, but we're still going to go get that for you. If it's in a hosted cryptocurrency wallet, which is very prevalent nowadays, even in the business industry context, payment in cryptocurrency is happening a lot. That also is not a problem for us, even though they're held internationally. A lot of major exchanges are very cooperative with law enforcement. Again, they hire a bunch of former law enforcement, so it's very helpful. So we can sort of freeze the wallet and do our tracing and get to there. If it's a foreign bank account, it depends on where it's landed. But we will try if we have a treaty with them. Not successful in Nigeria, not successful in China. But if we can trace it to a foreign bank account, we will do that. I've done that with Singapore. That worked. So Singapore, yes. And then unhosted cryptocurrency wallets. It depends on the type of cryptocurrency held. But they are often the most difficult because there's no third-party custodian to serve that warrant on unless we know who the perpetrator is. So a lot of times in these types of crimes, we're not going to be able to pursue a criminal case because we're not going to be able to get an identity on that person. They're an IP address in the United Kingdom, like in the London area, right? But they're not a known individual and even if we did know the individual, are they in a country that would allow repatriation, repatriating him, like getting him over? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on the type of crime. So oftentimes, these types of crimes don't have a very viable criminal case associated with it. So the one thing we're left with is sort of my department's, the asset recovery division's recovery of funds through seizure warrants, where we can see the money, even if we can't see the person. So unhosted cryptocurrency wallets, we can see the money, we just can't access it. Obviously, with bank accounts, it's the financial institutions that, as third-party custodians, that we're saying, hey, you have money for this person. We don't really know who they are. We know that there's a name on the account, but we don't care. We just need the money. And they're the ones who are going to give it to us. So, Rich, did all that make sense?
Oh, it did.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So here's our process for that. First, we sort of ask for a freeze so that we can stop movement as soon as possible. Then that agent that's going to have interviewed you and your staff, they're going to write up a seizure warrant affidavit, and we're going to go obtain a warrant to take custody of those funds. Once we have custody, that's sort of now I do the legal process to divest who we took it from and whoever else might be claiming an interest in those assets and get it titled to the United States. And then we go through a process to give it back to the victim. So this can be done pretty quickly administratively. That means just by the agencies. I don't have to walk into a courtroom. If our recovery is less than 500,000, if it's over 500,000, I have to file a case. If we have a criminal case associated with it, I'll probably do it with that criminal case. If we don't, I can file a separate civil forfeiture case, and this is United States versus, $1 million held in bank account XYZ. And then I send notice to the listed account holder and anyone else that might potentially have an interest that wants to come in and say, hey, you got that wrong. That's not stolen money. That's not theft. That's my legitimate money. And so that's the part that I litigate. And then once we get it forfeited, titled to the government, we then process getting it returned to the victims. And the saying that the wheels of justice are slow is 100% accurate. It's even slower than you can possibly imagine. So, but we get there. Okay. So sort of just my 2 cents on the perspective for you guys is, I just mentioned this is slow. Be fast to move initially, right? Really self-help as a victim, and be fast to move, all those financial institutions, the FBI. And then you need to be patient after that, right? So once the government has it, it's a slow process because it's a legal process. It's not entirely dependent on our movements anymore. It's now the court system. Also be realistic. I will be honest, a 30% recovery is pretty good. Sometimes we get higher. Sometimes, it feels like pennies on the dollar. We still do what we do no matter what that percentage is, because, I'm also doing it to make sure that crime doesn't pay. And, any penny out of the perpetrator's hands is worthwhile. As a victim, it's my opinion that you guys do not need your own litigation counsel, that your, in-house counsel is probably sufficient to deal with us. You're just going to spend more money if you hire a litigation firm to sort of do what the government's already required to do right by you, right? I mean, you're the victim. We're already required legally to do right by you. So can't tell you not to, but I have found them, in my opinion, to not ever really be useful in aiding in your recovery of funds. One other thing that I think is like a secondary scam, you also do not need a recovery firm. Okay, so these are these new firms that are popping out for victims of cryptocurrency scams in particular, who all they're doing is doing the same thing that honestly anyone on this webinar could do. and the law enforcement does, which is going on the blockchain and finding where your crypto moved. And then, saying, hey, here's our analysis, here's our TRM, our chain analysis of where your cryptocurrency moved. Go give this to the FBI. Well, so that's not incredibly helpful to the FBI because the FBI has to do the work regardless, right? Like they have to do their own tracing. They can't just rely on that recovery firm. And that recovery firm can do nothing more for you because they don't have the legal authority to go and seize the cryptocurrency like law enforcement does. So, and they charge you, by the way. So if they've done this let's just say like chain analysis for where the cryptocurrency you sent in a scam was transferred to and have traced it, 10 hops down to this wallet held by Binance. And then they say, here, we found it. And then you bring that to us and we go and we get all those funds. They're going to take, I think they're charging like a 30% recovery. So again, can't tell you what to do, but in my estimation, this almost feels like a secondary victimization of these firms. So don't fall prey to that. Maybe go after them if for some reason law enforcement says they can't do anything for you. But generally speaking, anything they're going to do, law enforcement's going to be able to actually do, and they don't take a cut.
Tanya, do you ever feel like some of these firms hinder your guys' ability to execute? Do they waste time?
No, the only way I think that they can hinder it, because you can run on two tracks at the same time, is if for some reason the person or the entity that's hired them has told them to wait to go to law enforcement, right? And that's what you do. And that may be the case, because I think someone's like, if you Google victim of cryptocurrency scam, I'm sure these are like sponsored, we'll help you get your money back, recovery, and maybe that's their first line of defense. It could delay you getting to law enforcement, but you can hire them and then you can still report it to law enforcement, and we're still going to do what we were always going to do, but now you might have them taking a cut.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I kind of touched on this earlier, but I think it's important to know, for your insiders, that could fall to, a state prosecution, possibly where you're at, if it's not enough money for feds. All prosecutor offices seem to be habitually under-resourced. So, it's not that a crime didn't occur and then we don't care. We just have to have some sort of priorities and thresholds, and that can vary by district and by region on what those are. But those are certainly, those are viable prosecutions because we know who the individual and the perpetrator are. And if we have the evidence, it's going to be easy enough to go forward with them. The true cyber type of crimes, those are harder because we have to identify and then locate and then extradite any foreign actors, which is not uncommon for those crimes to occur by people, is essentially like in a lot of small Asian countries, in particular, Burma, Myanmar. And so, just even thinking about indicting someone that we may never actually see, it's not a good use of our resources usually. But if we do end up pursuing a criminal case, in addition to getting the money that we can, we will also seek restitution against the defendant. And we collect on that 20 years plus incarceration. And generally, defendants have to make a minimum of payments of 10% of their gross income. One thing I want to say here too, because it's actually just come up in a case for me yesterday, is it's also worthwhile, again, to sort of do that self-help I have an individual who is running out of his 20 years. And he's making a really good living, but we're not able to really get full restitution against him. But the victims self-helped and filed a civil lawsuit against him and have their own civil judgment, which will remain enforceable for a while because you can keep renewing that judgment. So maybe not every transgression against your business is worth those efforts, but if it's significant enough and you have reason to believe that recovery is viable, I do encourage victims to self-help. Go ahead and get your own civil judgment against the individual who's wronged you. And you may be surprised, you may be able to continue to collect on that.
Tanya, what percentage of cases actually get litigated via criminal case?
Um, oh, of these, of this nature, it's pretty low. And it's, well, I can put it by category. Obviously the insider cases, I mostly know of them because we're prosecuting them. So, you know, all the ones that I do, we also have a related prosecution for. So that feels like 100% to me, right? For the BEC cases, it's 0%, right? Like we just realized that the most we're going to be able to recover is a couple 100,000. That's our best case scenario of sort of justice. In fact, we did identify one major hacker, and he was living in Vietnam, and Vietnam refused to help us. So, you know, basically all we could do, and this is sort of funny, all of his money was also in Vietnam, and they didn't want to take any of that or help us take any of that. But he had filed a claim in the bankruptcy of Sam Freeman's. I'm blanking on the big fraud, the big cryptocurrency scam fraud. It was really just a basic Ponzi scheme. Sam Friedman, do you remember, Rich?
I do. I forgot the name of the organization
Is it
though. Yeah,
FTX or oh gosh,
that sounds right. It's
yeah. So Sam Bankman-Fried got this. Okay, FTX. It was FTX. Okay, so FTX was forced to liquidate after that whole fraud, which by the way was really just a Ponzi scheme. They made it seem like it was a cryptocurrency fraud, but in that liquidation, investors, shareholders could file a claim, a bankruptcy claim. So we actually took this perpetrator's bankruptcy claim in the FTX case because that was the only thing domestically available to us. So kind of funny, but yeah, I would say. And then again, the hacker ones, the cases I have experience on is because we are prosecuting them. So that's 100% for me. So it's like 100, 0, 100. Okay, yeah, we're going into cryptocurrency. And this is mostly all for Mr. Stevens here. He loves this. So law enforcement agencies now have specialists, and we buy the blockchain analysis tools and all the fancy software that allows us to graph. So we're getting really good at this and creating sort of our expertise in tracing money. And there are two primary blockchains. Bitcoin, it's like serial numbers on dollar bills. You can follow it anywhere. It's like it has a tracking device. And so I can know that this Bitcoin from this victim went from this wallet to that wallet to that wallet, and I can identify it with specificity. If you're on the Ethereum blockchain, it's more of like an accounting system, like our financial system, where it's a series of debits and credits, and it's just as your money moves, you know, it's debited from this wallet and then credited to that wallet. So you can't be as precise to know where your money is. We just use basic accounting principles to go after the money, right? And so we're not double counting it. But with for crypto on the Bitcoin, we can trace it specifically. Okay, next slide. So hosted wallets, those are the ones that are held by a third-party custodian. And that means we can seize it by working with that third-party custodian. And so that's really good. That's like us working with a financial institution. They're holding the crypto and we say, hey, that's traceable to a crime. And they're like, I see your evidence. We agree with you. Here you go. And most cryptocurrency exchanges are offshore. So technically my warrant has no jurisdiction over them. But again, they're all super cooperative and basically acknowledging those warrants. So that's great. What's also super helpful for us is that we can often get KYC, which means know your customer from these. So that helps prove our fraud, you know, that who's on the wallet, where the wallet's being accessed from doesn't match and doesn't match the story that was told to the victim. Own unhosted wallets, the owner of the wallet is the custodian. Now, if we know who that person is, I can serve the warrant on that owner. But again, if it's my guy in Vietnam, I'm not going to be able to do anything. So unless for some what's called centralized cryptocurrencies, we do have some companies that will burn and reissue that cryptocurrency. And so what that means is on the blockchain, the crypto itself is controlled by the, what's the word I'm looking, by the mint for it, right? So Tether is one of them, right? Like Tether is controlled by the company Tether, no matter where it's located. So they can essentially, what they kind of call blacklist, say this Tether is no longer any good. We're burning that currency. And so I can seize Tether from anywhere just by going to that central location and saying, hey guys, can you call this Tether blacklisted / burn, and then reissue new ones to me. So that's been sort of revolutionary for us and allowing us to get access to some cryptocurrencies that we otherwise wouldn't. Okay, next, Rich, because I know we're getting short on time. Oh, yeah, this is my favorite case study for you guys. This is a real case I had, and it goes to my general theme of like ways you guys can self-help. So this company was using Slack as a means of communicating. The CEO's personal email account was compromised, like so his personal one. And that was the recovery address for his G Suite and his Slack account. So through that personal email, this hacker was able to get into the company's G Suite and Slack accounts. So then through that, the attacker had access to all the top executives' accounts. And at some point, because this company would take cryptocurrency as collateral, and some guy had paid off his loan and wanted his crypto back, so the executive wrote a message to authorize the transfer of the cryptocurrency back to this borrower. At the time, that was worth about 4.4 million. The attacker immediately edited in the message the wallet to send the cryptocurrency. And all of this occurred in 2018. Next. So the wallet that the company sent it to was an unhosted wallet. And the perpetrator was unknown. It was unhosted. It wasn't in a centralized cryptocurrency that we could get to. So both law enforcement and the company just sat there and on the blockchain watched this crypto sit in these wallets for about 3 years. So they just sat there. But then one day the original perpetrator wants to actually use these funds. And 3 years later in 2021, he starts sending this money to a company called Swaplab. And Swaplab is is like a currency exchange. So they literally, like in the name, they swap one currency for another currency. And he was moving it in several different transfers, the original Ethereum that he had stolen. And the company, not law enforcement, the company immediately seeing the movement contacted Swaplab to freeze those transfers. And we missed a lot, but we were able to seize about 1,000 Ethereum of at that time. That was worth about you can see the price went up, but we were able to get freeze about 2.3 million. And so
Talk about
eventually we were
self-help.
able, yeah. I mean, the perpetrator still got a lot, but like that's not a bad recovery. And I love this story because the victim just continued to self-help, and then we were able, because they did, we were able to move quickly with them to actually get this returned to them. So
I think we've got
and then
three
this is
minutes
a,
and one more case study.
yeah. And I mean, it might be better to just take questions if anyone has them, because I turned off basically everything, so I can't see the chat or anything. So do we have any questions? Do you know?
Uh, I don't think we asked for him quite yet. I don't see him, but I
Okay,
can,
cool.
yeah.
All right, I'll keep going until so I this was also a very interesting case in the cyber arena for me. Uh, I don't know if you guys remember, but there was a company called PhotoBucket. Um, it hosted over 10 billion photos and had like 100 million users. And people would upload their photos and then send their photo albums to, to people, their families and friends, etc. It had several privacy settings, like one-time access, or like you need a password for access, or you had to be specifically invited through a link access. And I think some of them were just publicly available. Well, we had two guys create a software application named PhotoFucket. I think you can see where this is going, which allowed users to gain access to private slash password protected albums. And basically they were calling off sort of just very like salacious type of material that people would not want to be public. Initially, they developed an application that would fusker, and you guys probably know these terms better than I do, but process by which they would just go fish, like just keep trying and trying and trying, like have an automated system for that. But then they kept like PhotoBucket, to their credit, kept trying to patch these holes. And then once security improved, the defendants went to finding more like what they called ripping, exploiting their website security to gain access to individuals' passwords and private albums. So, they sold this software, and then their customers could access and then share sexually explicit images that they had stolen from them. One of the exploits that seems so easy was they went into the system and had PhotoBucket send them guest passwords, as if the user themselves had invited them to a private album. Like so easy, right? They only received about 100,000 in profit from this, but obviously, I think essentially this is part of what made PhotoBucket itself go out of business. It just it really compromised the company's ability to offer privacy. The main defendant received 29 months, but the reason why I thought this is interesting is that PhotoBucket actually wanted the co-conspirator, who was more in charge of finding ways to exploit and updating their software versus promoting the software. He agreed to probation and to work for the company for free for about 18 months to work off his restitution to come help them get better safety measures in place. So, and I think
A
that's about,
little bit of a silver lining, maybe.
yeah, no, I was just like, it,
Yeah.
put them to use to figure out where the actual issues are in your system, because he knew them and he knew how to get through it. I mean, it almost feels like it's worthwhile to have, if you're doing something like this, to have someone on your payroll to do that. And he wasn't making that much money. Surely he could pay him more than 100K, you know?
Probably. Well,
Yeah,
Tanya, I think we're out of time, but I really do appreciate this. I appreciate the conversation and the behind the scenes look at how the U.S. Attorney's Office, takes care of, our citizens.
we try for sure. And I mean, if you get nothing else, just watch out for your loved ones. The law enforcement does not insist on cryptocurrency payments. So um, just a PSA.
Thank you so very much, Tanya. Yeah, these are always fascinating. I get to hear these during the holidays when we hang out, but
Yeah.
I'm sure that, it's really, really cool for everybody else to be able to hear these too. Thanks for your stories.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Yeah. Take care.